Thank you very much for having me, I should say, again at JUNG's Architectural Talks. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and to talk to you, and especially also being here back in Warsaw, which is a city which I have seen over the last 30 years really developing to a very, very beautiful place. So, great place to be. We're designing for the future, and the urban world is changing, and it's changing fast, as we all experience. I've been introduced, so let's go down to the basics. Our cities, our inner cities, cities with more than 1 million inhabitants, are usually about 12 degrees warmer in the city center due to urban heat island effects than they are at the edge of the city. 12 degrees is, however, a temperature range which is normally sort of 1,000 kilometers away in nature. So it's very obvious that something is not quite in balance. We also have 6 to 10 decibels more ambient noise than we should have in order to keep windows open at night to have a healthy sleep. And we've got, last but not least, about 2 billion people in the world who suffer of breathing diseases, just because we've got too much fine dust in the world. Fine dust from cars, fine dust from the industry, fine dust from all sorts of things that actually do us harm. You hear me? That's fine dust. But to think that we're the only generation facing problems would be stupid. All the generations have always had challenges, and they all had to find ways around it, and we will have to find ways around it, and we will. But we're facing also geopolitical issues, which make life very difficult, because the problems that we need to solve require big global efforts. But if only half the world is prepared to collaborate, then it's getting very, very difficult, because you can't just stop at a border. The wind, the heat, fine dust, all these issues don't stop at the border. That's a global challenge, and we need to make sure that we can get an overarching understanding despite all the geopolitical challenges. And we have this last generation who is actually waking up, or trying to wake us up even, to say, no, there is a problem. You have to act now, don't just ignore it. And somehow politics, us, we're all a little bit slow in taking into account that the time to act is now. Heat island effects in cities are really, really big. And we have to work towards improvements, particularly for elderly people, but also for people with illnesses and diseases, because that is causing them to die. There are actually, in very hot summers, a lot more deaths due to heat island effects in the cities. And we also need, to create more pleasurable places in our cities for all of us to enjoy that. Global ocean temperatures have been rising very, very fast recently. Much, much more than anybody really can explain. And what does that do? Water evaporates in very, very big amounts. These big amounts are coming over land, and especially in cities bigger than 1 million, with temperatures bigger than 12 degrees in the inner city, higher than at the edge of the city, we get a turbulence which brings an upwards movement. The upwards movement means that the temperature is cooling off. Cooling off means the water falls out. That means we get strong rain events over the city. Huge amounts of water due to the ocean temperature rise, coming towards big cities because of the turbulences with the heat island effects. Temperatures cool off as the air moves up, and then we get the cooling off, and we get very, very bad strong rain events, and that is an issue. We're not prepared for that. And if we want to mitigate these risks, then we have to do something about it. And I would like to say that because it is not quite obvious. A lot of what I propose is not actually tackling the original cause of what is the problem. What I'm proposing is a quick fix with plants. Plants can help us to fix quickly. It's not solving the original problem. We still have to work on solving the original problem. But we also need a quick fix because otherwise it's getting too late. If we look at these two pictures, one is a thermal picture from space onto Manhattan, and the other one is a normal picture. The green one is the normal picture. And if you look wherever you find a dark green spot here, you see Manhattan over there. Can I just use the pointer? This here is Manhattan, and the rectangle here is Central Park. The greener it is, the cooler it is. Here, it's cooler. Here, it's greener. And wherever you go, wherever it's greener, it's cooler. Darker blue means cooler. A very simple method to say we need more plants in order to bring the temperature down, because lower temperatures are better for us in our environment in cities. Where should we bring the plants? We should bring the plants where we have double whopper effects. If we bring them onto the roofs, we have the effect that the roofs are shaded. They are not heating up as much. If they are not heating up as much, the heat island effect will go down. But growing on the roofs also means we've got substrate. Substrate can absorb water, retains it, and slowly drains it after a rain event. So if we want to tackle strong rain events, we need more substrate on the roofs. More substrate can hold more water back and slowly drains it into the ground. More water on the substrate on the roofs means more evaporation. More evaporation means more absorption of lateral heat. That means temperature goes down, less heat island effect. More plants in the city, more plants on the roofs, more plants on the facade means we absorb more fine dust. More fine dust absorbed, lesser temperature means we can actually open windows. And opening windows means we don't need as much air conditioning. Not as much air conditioning means we don't need as much electricity, which is still very much produced with fossil fuels and emits CO2. Reducing the energy consumption for natural cooling purposes means we need less energy, less CO2 emission, therefore better conditions. But that means we should also bring the noise level down in the cities, because only then can we open the windows without actually having an unhealthy sleep. Having more green facades growing on substrate on the facade, the substrate actually helps us to absorb the noise levels in the city. Therefore, we bring 6 to 8 decibels, the noise level, the ambience noise level down at night. That means more open windows is possible. I just repeat it once more. I want to rub it in. Less noise means healthier sleep. Open windows means less energy consumption. More plants on the roof means more fine dust absorption. Overall, healthier conditions, better for our environment, quick fix. And for that, we need also, in the public realm, more areas where we can have the plants, but also the water absorption. Strong rain events need to get rid of the water very quickly to some place where we can cope with it. That means we need to design parks in such a way that some areas can be safely flooded and can allow the water to sit there until it's sort of sinking slowly into the ground. That's what we have done here in the Olympic Park in London. And there are huge areas which are normally used as a park area, but once a strong rain event happens, they are being flooded, deliberately flooded, to actually absorb the water fast so that it doesn't do much damage to the city. And in our team, on our global team who is looking into nature, Nature Plus, we actually have discovered that nature, the loss of nature, is one of the biggest threats. And that has also been recognized by the European community, and it's actually now listed. The loss of nature is one of the biggest threats, one of the 5 biggest threats that mankind actually faces. And we need to restore nature. Not only should we stop damage, not only should we make sure that there isn't any further damage for the future, we should also make sure that we repair the damage that we have already committed by recreating better solutions for nature so that it can recreate. Very, very important. So we as ARUP actually have committed to say that by 2030 we want to completely reduce whatever we do damage to nature with the projects that we are doing. And by 2050, we want to make sure that with whatever we do, we want to also do everything to restore the damage that actually has been done, to fully institute the natural condition. So bringing more plants into the city has lots of benefits. I don't actually want to read all these benefits out to you, but it's quite clear. Having more green in the city means we bring the temperature down, it's more comfortable for people to be out, but we all like to be amongst green spaces, green parks. When we have stress, we go into the park, we walk into the woods to actually relax a little bit. And that is due to enzymes. The light movement in plants actually inspires our brain and issues an enzyme. And this enzyme does two things. It keeps us awake, and at the same time, it is stress lowering. So more green actually helps us to lower stress. And you might have seen more and more airport lounges have green walls in the airport lounges because they've actually discovered that it also works internally. So, people who get under stressful situations, and a lot of people are afraid of flying, they put that into the walls and actually works. And I'm only mentioning it because I think, we need to be aware that even though we might think it's gimmicks, it actually works, and it helps us to improve the situation for lots and lots of people. Stress in our society is one of the most prominent cause for diseases. And these stress diseases can be improved significantly if we bring people closer to green, more into green. And vertical green is actually much more effective than horizontal green because you are confronted with it and you see a lot more the green. You are much more aware of it. So the path to climate neutralization is actually comparatively clear. We need to look at the carbon footprint. We need to make sure that we prioritize the actions very quickly, that we then set up management programs to improve the situation and to execute plans. And then we have to make sure that we do proper designs and deliver them and also monitor the result. Lots of these plans are being made, how these things can be achieved. We just have to do it now. We can't just throw the report over the fence and say, there you go, do it. We all are responsible to actually make it happen. So we need to visualize how things can be done so that people, our population, takes part in it. We have to take them along. More than ever, it is important with all the digital means that we have to communicate with people in the city, that we bind them into the process. We have to make the process theirs. They have to buy into rescuing the world. You cannot say, rescue it, I wait here. They have to take part in it. They have to come along. But they can only come along if we give them a chance to understand it. So we have to break it down and we have to visualize it. Another tool is actually that we have 4 cities developed apps where you can see on a daily level, and you all probably have that, the weather apps, you see whether it's raining or not, what temperature there is, what the UV value is, and whether it's better to stay inside or to go outside, and all these things. These things are important so that we take people along to have better living conditions, and our information level actually allows for that. For such things, it's very important that we produce digital twins. Digital twins are actually a 3D, not only a 3D, a simulation of the conditions in our cities, where we try to bring lots of different apps into being. As a city twin, in a way, I always compare it a little bit with a shelf. You have this shelf called city twin, and then you put lots of different applications into this shelf. A shelf in a digital twin could be, an app in that shelf digital twin could be, how many flats are empty in the city, where can you get access to it, how can you rent it, and so on. Just a very normal application. Which shops are available to be rented? Which restaurants are there? How many car parks are free during peak times, and so on? where do you go for certain information. But it can also be, when is rain coming? Is it a strong rain event? What is when there is excess heat? How do we get all these things to inform our population and to make them part of that whole action that we are dealing with? So digital twins can be visualized, and they need also to be so that people recognize their place, that they can identify where they are, and that they feel sort of part of that whole development. Otherwise, it's not going to work very well. And we're working on these digital twins, and it is not always very easy to get the information, but luckily we all have mobile phones these days, and the mobile phone data are actually giving us an awful lot of information about where we go, when we go, how dense the population is, if we go fast or slow, if we go by car, if we go by public transport, if we go by bike. All this information can be subtracted from our mobile phone information. And that is a curse, but also a blessing to some extent, because it enables us to take very, very precise decisions at the right moment. So plants are very, very important for human beings. First of all, as a natural resource for our food, but also for animals and biodiversity. Biodiversity is actually very important. We don't even appreciate that. And biodiversity isn't just a few bees that fly around the blossoms. Biodiversity starts in the ground with the microbes. If the microbes don't exist, the whole chain of biodiversity is not going to work. And we need to be aware of that. Biodiversity is the whole chain, including ourselves. We have to see ourselves as part of the biodiversity chain, otherwise the whole thing won't work. But it won't work without biodiversity, because then the whole range of animals will die, and we will die with them, because we are actually part of that range. So where plants don't have enough space and opportunity to grow, we have serious problems in cities due to excess heat, also to loss of biodiversity, but also to flood risks. Where living conditions get really uncomfortable, we consume more and more energy, because, I mentioned it before, we start using air conditioning. Air conditioning is actually very bad and big energy consumer. And I want to give you examples like existing historical cities. They are not very easy to be transformed, and they are challenges, and I don't always have an answer for you how we can rescue these cities, but we need to work on them, and it needs all, my colleagues who have spoken before and all the other intelligent people in the world need to collaborate together to find solutions that we can actually maintain our history and yet transform it into a good future. And one example I want to show you, which we have developed, is actually not just having sun protection to fence off the heat, but actually to absorb the heat and to gain the energy. And in this case, we actually have designed a system which is sort of double glazed units. In the middle, we have a water fluid, which is inked with green algae. And the sunlight feeds the green algae, and we bubble in CO2. I actually show you. We bubble in CO2, and the CO2 and the UV light makes algae grow. And through a pipe system, we actually run the fluid over a brush system, which takes the algae out to harvest it. Then we ferment the algae, and we produce biogas. That biogas being furnaced produces, first of all, the CO2, which we need to bubble back in, but also produces heat, which we can use to produce hot water that we need every day for showers, for dishwashers and washing machines and so on. So basically, the idea is that we harvest energy wherever possible. Not just big energy plants somewhere, and then big distances where we lose lots of energy until it arrives. We want as local as possible energy to be harvested where it is available. And green algae have become very important because they actually absorb enormous amounts of CO2 when they grow. So they too would actually be a very good solution to reduce CO2 emission. And I want to bring you another example, one I always bring in my lectures because people actually understand that quite well. There are buildings and building types which require air conditioning. I'm not saying air conditioning per se is bad. There are functions where it is required. But if it is required, I'm always even arguing sometimes with our own colleagues to say it has to be on a green roof. A green roof, why? When we need energy the most, when we need cooling the most, say when it's the hottest days in the year, the roof, a black roof, heats up to 80, 90 degrees. This heat will evaporate into the air. 3 meters above the air, above the roof, we actually absorb the air intake and take this heat into the air conditioning system, and then the temperature is 10 to 15 degrees higher than normal surrounding air temperature. So the first 15 degrees we only cool because this plant is not sitting on a green roof. If there was a green roof, the air temperature above the green roof is actually normal surrounding air temperature, sometimes even a degree or two less because of the evaporation cooling from the evaporating humidity from the plants. And that means that about half of the energy for peak load cooling could be saved. We just don't need to cool down the first 15 degrees. And imagine a city like Warsaw, like London, like Berlin, like New York. You know, if the peak load cooling could be reduced by half, that's enormous amounts of energy, and this energy doesn't emit CO2 because we don't use it. So, you know, we can actually reduce energy very quickly, and I'm coming back, plants are a quick fix. Putting a green roof on buildings is a quick fix. It can be done very quickly. We do it this year, and next year we've got a green roof. It works very, very fast and very effective. But we also need green plants because we need to move towards 15-minute cities. 15-minute cities is an expression where the idea is that by walking or cycling within a radius of 15 minutes of your house, you should have all the necessary functions like schools, work, shopping, culture. All these things should be close to you within 15 minutes. But not only that, also the recreation. If, you know, I can recreate myself because I can go to a park which is within the range of 15 minutes, I'm not sitting in a car to drive somewhere to go to a park. If we can reduce our mobility, inner city mobility, significantly because we move towards 15-minute cities, we actually reduce our mobility in a city quite a lot. That means traffic goes down, streets can be made more available for bike lanes. Bike lanes enable us to have even a little bit bigger range, so everything works in a win-win situation, but we have to do it. And luckily, we see quite a lot of cities in Europe actually going that way, and we see the benefit of it. It works more and more, and it's more a pleasure to be in cities where they have big bike lanes and reduce traffic, because then it's just nicer to move about in the city, and it's usually greener cities too. And this was an example where we have entered a competition in Stuttgart. Luckily, you know, we didn't have to prove that it actually works because we haven't been chosen when we entered this competition. But having said that, the idea was there that we reduce traffic, we bring more evaporation into the dense urban space by evaporating water off the ground, by having green facades, green roofs, and therefore people actually come more into the public realm again because it's more comfortable to be there. And there is another aspect which is very, very important, not necessarily an engineering aspect, but the social cohesion, and we have heard that tonight as well from the other two colleagues. Social cohesion is extremely important for our society to survive. And social cohesion requires good public spaces to which people like to come, because there you actually have a melting point of different cultures, different age groups, different attitudes, whatever, and that's the place where people exercise tolerance, and we need that if we want to survive. During the pandemic, we actually have seen where people weren't allowed to leave the house or weren't supposed to leave the house, that we had a lot of racism and a lot of aggressivity in the network. With more social cohesion, trained in public spaces, public realm, that doesn't happen. And we actually have seen after the pandemic that it was reduced again. So, we have to make sure that we produce very good spaces, comfortable spaces to bring people together. And to bring people together to reduce inner urban mobility, we need shared mobility, and shared mobility requires mobility hubs, where it's very, very easy to move from one means of transportation to the next one, where the ticketing is seamless and where it is actually a pleasure to go with these ways of traveling through the city. It needs to be comfortable and no friction. We're all lazy, we don't want friction. So, we have to have it easy, and if it goes easy, it's a pleasure. If it's a pleasure, we do it. And there are other ways of going through cities, and where cities have the options, we should actually consider them. Freeing the streets can also work with cable cars. If we bring some of the traffic off the streets, we can dedicate that street more for cyclists, more for pedestrian, walking people and so on, for walking the city, and it becomes just better. Air quality, because we don't have that many cars there, and we have more space to free the street space for other uses. And where we have rivers, like you've got a big river here, it could be water transport. Public transport on the river can be made available. And again, the same aim, we give more space to the city. The whole problem originally might have been not knowing, ignorance. But in the meantime, I think a lot of the problem that we have is just greed. People want to make money, and they don't care if making that money causes damage. So we as a society actually have to make sure that we enforce that the right things are being done and that the greed has to stop. And I mentioned it before, we need to collect energy wherever possible. Every small spot where we can actually absorb some energy, whether that's ground energy, whether it's solar energy, whether that's hot water pumps, whether it's air exchangers, whatever we can collect should be collected and should be fed into a low-X network where we can get our energy. Because the bigger the mix is, and that's also an important aspect of city planning, we need a very good mix in the city. We shouldn't separate functions. They should come together, because, say, in the mornings when everybody wants to have a shower, we should use the excess heat from shops who normally want to have cooling. So when they cool, there is excess heat. That excess heat needs to be fed in a system which we then use for heating houses, for heating water, and so on. All these functions clustered together make the use of energy much, much more efficient, and the same amount of energy can be reused several times. That makes it more efficient, and that means less CO2 emission. Biodiversity I've talked about, and I don't want to keep you unnecessarily long tonight because it's late already, but it is something that we need to address. Urban food production is something that becomes often an issue, and I'm not too big a fan of urban food production. Having said that, though, I realized that there are a lot of kids in our cities who don't have the slightest idea how plants grow. They only know salad from the supermarket. They don't know if a strawberry grows on a tree or in the ground. They don't know where a carrot comes from. And I think inner city food production could actually play a vital role in reconnecting people to where food comes from. And last but not least, we have huge industrial roof surfaces which could be used. And when they are being used for food production or for anything else, but as long as it's substrate that holds water, we can also produce food there. And if they are being used to produce food, they hold water back. Strong rain events are being absorbed. Upheating is reduced. I mean, it's the same effect again, and the industry has to play a vital role. With the huge areas of roof surfaces, we should make sure that they have their contribution to deliver. More plants in the city help us, and where the rooftops aren't enough, we need to go into the facade. And we have developed about 15 years ago this little film, and I'm often being sort of accused that I still show this old film by my colleagues, but I actually show this old film because I want to say already 15 years back, we have been thinking about how we can re-green existing cities. I mentioned before, old existing traditional places. We need to vitalize them and create a future for them, and plants can help us to do that. One way of getting green roofs very, very quickly implemented is a system which we have developed, a very cheap system, and that's these bags. We call them pocket habitats. You take the pebbles of a black roof down and you put these pockets on with volcanic substrate. Volcanic substrate is a bit lighter than pebbles, therefore you can put a bit more substrate on, it can hold more water, and it's pre-seeded. You open these bags and the weather does it, and we have a green roof very quickly. And it can be implemented by everybody very easily without much of an investment, and it would be very, very effective. This is at the museum of at the German Architecture Museum in Frankfurt, where we have had an exhibition. And these bags, just to show you, they have been pre-seeded and exposed in the inner courtyard 3 months. And that's after 3 months. Just imagine we have green roofs like that within 3 months. Just to come back, plants can do it as a quick fix, very fast. And similar, the idea that it can be in containers on walls. Where we have big exposed walls, I think we could also do that on walls. And if we actually don't think of designed color, pattern, whatever, but if we think more of meadows, the way we let nature actually contribute to decide which plants grow best there, then we actually have a very good chance to get much greener cities very fast. And where permanent green worries people, we should at least go on construction sites and put green on all the scaffoldings. The green scaffoldings actually will hold very quickly the fine dust from the construction site away. It actually holds back noise development, which bothers people. That's a psychoacoustic effect. A noise that you don't see, a noise source that you don't see is not bothering you as much, so it lowers the stress. And that's the system which we have developed with sack linen, 3 layers of sack linen glued together with wallpaper glue, mixed in seeds, stitched it together with a natural fiber, put some rings in, put it up, and water hoses which are sweating water out. And again, within 3 months, you've got a green facade, and the scaffolding is not to be seen, and it's holding back, and it's more green in the city. And every city actually has about 10 to 15% of construction sites at any given moment. If this sort of rotates around in the city, it would be a big, big contribution. A lot of these ideas are in our book, which we have issued in the German Architecture Museum exhibition, which was a traveling exhibition, or which still is a traveling exhibition. And you know, you can buy the book and you can see a lot of these ideas, and these ideas are being described for you as population to do it yourself. We all have to start doing something and contribute. So, you know, these are all the ideas sort of listed, and there is also the idea that if we build new, we can do completely crazy things. And not always everything is the right thing. And I don't know with whom I've discussed it, but not trying something new is the worst thing we can do. If we try new things and it's not the best, so be it. But if we don't try to improve things, we get stuck. We need to test new things. We need to test new grounds. We need to come up with new ideas and actually develop these ideas. And if we actually take this idea serious, we actually have to dive straight into subject matter. Thank you very much.